Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Goffstown School Board. I call the first, we're going to actually have two public hearings tonight, so we have the first public hearing to order at 7 o'clock. We can all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so the first public hearing is pursuant to RSA 198 20B3A. The Goffstown School Board will conduct a public hearing to accept public input relative to accepting as unanticipated revenue a donation towards the Goffstown High School field renovation project. So, Scott, do you want to talk more on that?
Yeah, sure. As we have discussed at numerous school board meetings, we are very fortunate to have a project that is about to commence to renovate the game field behind Goffstown High School and go from grass to a synthetic artificial surface with lights. So with that project, in terms of the funding sources for that, we were able to secure federal grants, $1 million for Goffstown. New Boston School Board also is contributing $100,000, their use of a federal grant. Up to $350,000 will be from impact fees from the town of Goffstown for developers who pay fees to develop in town. And then the balance of that, the other $500,000, is coming from an anonymous donation of a business owner in the community. So part of this process tonight is in order to, we have to accept this donation, and you will have to make a motion afterwards to both accept and expend. And I did give a one-pager in terms of what that proposed motion would look like, and I consulted with our school district's legal counsel to make sure that we use the right verbiage on that. But again, we're super fortunate to have this individual who is willing to contribute in such a magnificent way to help our Goffstown community and all of our kids and adults too, because I think adults could be at one point using that field. So.
Right. So does anybody have any questions for Scott? We'll do the motion in the board meeting later on. Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Scott, just to remind the audience, as part of this, we're not necessarily going to have the infrastructure there, but we're bringing water, electrical, and sewer to the field for future development?
So I have to clarify that. So electrical, yes, because we're bringing in, 4 light poles. In terms of water, yes, water already exists there. But in terms of sewer, we're not bringing sewer because the sewer pipe itself, the next closest connection would be where the softball field is. And if we were, there are some discussions about having bathrooms, real bathrooms, not porta potties, but in consultation with our engineer and architect, we think that a leach field would make more sense in that area than trying to connect it all the way. So we would probably go that route, Jared. So but everything else we're putting in, whether it be conduit for electrical and or IT needs. So we're going to have a lot of conduit underneath the field for potential future use. And that was something that, the committee, strongly recommended. I can't agree more. I think it's important to build for what you might eventually need.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else for Scott before I open up to public comment? All right, seeing none, I will open up to public comment on this public hearing. Is there any? Go ahead. You know the drill. Say your name and address.
Good evening, Donna Pinard, 65 Riverview Park Road, and I just wanted to talk about the fact that we just, Mr. Cloutier negotiated for the contract, which I believe went to the Budget Committee, that you will hear about tonight. And as you know, Dan has always recused himself from negotiating for the teacher's contract because at the time when I was a teacher.
Hang on 1 second, Donna. This is on the public hearing part.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, so pause, and we'll have you come back up.
Me bad.
Yeah, thank you. If you can strike that, Denise, please. Is there any comment on the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment, and if there's no other questions for Scott, I'll take an adjournment, motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. By Shane, second by Jared. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we are unanimous. So now we have a second public hearing, which I will call to order at 7:05. And this is pursuant to RSA 198-20B-3A. The Goffstown School Board will be holding a public hearing to accept public input relative to accepting a lead remediation grant for New Hampshire schools from the New Hampshire Education Department. So do you want to discuss that too?
Sure. Again, most recently, the state adopted more stringent limits in terms of the amounts of lead that would be in drinking water, and not so much just drinking water, but coming out of any faucet in any of our school buildings. So with that, all of the faucets were tested in the school district, and we found that we had to replace a good number of them. The state recognized that this was going to be an issue not just for Goffstown, but for almost every single school district in New Hampshire. They set up a fund to assist school districts, of which they were going to reimburse school districts up to 50% of the cost to replace faucets. As of now, in speaking with Laura Taylor and Dawn Tabor, I think we are very close to about $20,000 of money spent on replacing faucets, and that includes not only the fixtures themselves, but we've also had to hire a plumber to do it. Although our own maintenance staff was able to do some, due to the sheer volume and the time frames, we did have a plumber assist us. So we're almost at $20,000. So with that, we'll probably be looking somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000 that we'll be getting from the state. So when you look at a proposed motion later on, I drafted one. I put it would be in excess of 5. At the time I wrote it, I didn't know what the amount was going to be. But anything over a $5,000 grant has to hold a public hearing, and that's why we're having one tonight. But again, it's more stringent standards. We had to replace a lot of faucets. Good news is that we have been retesting them, and they're all coming up good. So that's a positive.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Scott? All right, seeing none, I'll open to public comment on this public hearing. Seeing none, I will close it. So if there's no further discussion, I'll take a motion to adjourn this public hearing.
So moved.
By Dan, do I have a second? Second. By Caroline. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right, thank you. So now I am going to call the school board meeting to order at 7:08, and we'll say the pledge one more time.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have correspondence tonight?
We do not.
Oh, all right. Commendations, good news. I know Lily couldn't make it tonight, but does anybody else? Go ahead, Shane, then go ahead, Scott, after you.
Thank you. So last week I was invited to meet with a group called Goffstown Parents in Action. And for those who don't know, this is a group of parents who are trying to raise awareness and provide some education on how to keep our children, our schools, and our community safe from violence in all of different types of forms. So it was a pretty enlightening meeting to attend, because getting the parental side of things is always interesting, and I was really impressed with how prepared they were and how much research they'd done, so just wanted to shout them out. So.
Awesome, thank you, Shane, appreciate it. Go ahead, Scott.
I wanted to acknowledge our teacher here, Mr. Eric Greenland, for culinary arts. There was a recent Once Upon a Pie contest, and Mr. Greenland's class made over 30 pies, and
Holy cow.
one of them won first place in the youth division. So,
Nice.
but I know that the organizers were very pleased that the high school had such phenomenal representation, and I think now, after this experience, that the challenge has to go out to the other schools, you know, to see who's going to have the best pie amongst all of our schools. And Greta, you were there, so you could vouch for it. It was a good event, and it was great to see the high school participate.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And if I can just add, there was a friendly, or maybe not so friendly, competition of the kids against the town office members. And it was, the question was, what is, you know, can you define pie?
Oh, my God, yeah.
And the town side could only go 2 digits out, and I lost count, but the young, I don't know
who she is, but
was-
she went out like 30 digits.
I stopped
right?
at 20. No one was going to contest it, but we said, okay, wait, it's time to go on. So it was impressive.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
that
don't know
she
who that
was
kid was.
That's
studying
awesome.
prior to it, but she
And
just
I did not
ripped it
rig
off.
Wow.
that part of it. I did rig the other one, but not that young lady. I mean,
That's awesome. Anyone else, commendations, good news? No? All right, seeing none, we'll close. So now I'm going to open to public comment. So Donna, come back up, say your name again.
Take two. Donna Pinard, 65 Riverview Park Road. I wanted to talk about the contract and the fact that so much time goes into negotiating these contracts, and now you can actually use him for negotiating for teacher contracts now. In the second year of our marriage, one time, we went to our church, and we approached with questions to the presenter. And we were last in line, and Dan was debating with this person who finally got fed up with him and said, by the way, this was a Catholic church, submit or get out was his answer. I think he was tired. I think he wanted to go, and Dan was, and I thought, it's a top-down organization. What's he supposed to do? You know, you can't change anything by talking to him. What are you going to do? Fly to Rome and talk to the magistrate? It's a top-down. It's top-down. You can't change it. So I thought maybe it was an appropriate way to end the debate. But when we have contracts, you know, it's top-down here as well. If you have a dress code and the dress code is in the student handbook, then it needs to be followed. If there's a contract and the contract legally is binding, it needs to be followed. And it's difficult if a teacher has to email quoting the contract saying, please fulfill this part of the contract. So, you know, the words are not nice, but submit or get out. You have to follow it because the school board has voted on it. They've put the time in. They've negotiated. The contract is there. It's legally binding. Please submit or get out. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Any other public comment for tonight? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment. So moving on, approval of November 7th school board minute. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
I did, and I have one amendment I'd like to propose, please.
Sure.
At that meeting, we talked about the school board mission, and
What page are you on?
I do not know.
Okay, but it was about the mission?
It was, I remember reading it, and I remember it was about the
Page
mission.
5.
Okay.
Mission.
And in there, I had made a note that I would like the word equitable in number 2 to be in the minutes as having the meaning fair and impartial. And we talked about it, and there was some verbiage,
Yep.
if you all remember there. So I
do.
just wanted the minutes to show that we agreed that we were voting on a term equitable, meaning fair and impartial.
Right, that everybody agreed. on
And
the
everybody
same.
agreed to it.
Okay, that's fine. Anyone else see anything?
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes for the November 7th, 2022 school board meeting as amended.
Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second? By Ginny. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Abstaining.
One abstention, Denise. Thank you. All right, so committee reports, Finance Committee. Dan, you want to start with the manifest?
I'd like to go and offer a motion for a total manifest value that we approve of $1,141,428.11.
All right, thanks, Dan. Do I have a second? Second. By Caroline. Go ahead.
What we have is payroll taxes and benefits in $944,597, so that's the bulk of it. We have sped activity of just under $50,000. Of that, we have 3 out of district. Lighthouse, $12,000, the Birch Tree, $10,000, and Spalding Academy, $8,300. Then we have some contracted services, Literacy Learning, $7,200, Johnson ABA Consulting, $6,700, New Boston Physical Therapy, $5,600. General expenses, around $67,500. Of that, Dead River, a good piece of it, $27.7 thousand for propane. Xerox Financial, which is our quarterly copier lease, for $12,500. Arbiter Pay, that's where we pay the officiating fees for athletics. We deposited $10,000 into that fund. At the A&F committee meeting this evening, we requested that Scott give us a breakdown, perhaps by school or perhaps by sports or something, so we can report out that, we're just where the money is going. It's going there. This has saved administration a lot of time. About 95% of those who are getting paid have a direct deposit, so we have a lot less lost checks and having to redo the checks and things of that nature, and they get it. And once the sports authority approves that, yes, they were there officiating, that the sign-off goes, the placement they get their money. So it has been a very good for all but football. Why do I say that? Football has a different payment system. We won't go there because it's not on the... Cleanorama, custodial contracted services, about $6,100. This is about a month. We also asked, can you tell us, is it a specific position? We haven't been able to hire the custodial services that we have wanted to. We have an agreement with the GESS that allows us to hire outside custodial services to try to keep the schools clean for the kids and for everybody else who attends. And so we're doing that. We're watching that very closely. Plum Master is for what you heard earlier. We're getting money, 50% reimbursed from the state for the lead in the water. We're doing so far, we're paying another $5,700. Half of that is going to come back in what we just approved, or what we heard about. We haven't made the motion yet to accept it, but if we accept it, we can get half back. Staples is where we're buying our paper and school supplies now. That's about $5,500. And Performance Food Service is where we get most of our stuff. It's about $17,423.72, just about. Food, commodities, milk, and I'm presuming chocolate milk.
Indeed.
Thank you, Dan. Does
Thank
anybody have
you.
any questions? Okay, seeing none, so I have a motion, I have a second. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? We're unanimous. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Scott, is there anything right now? Any more with Finance Committee?
No, I just wanted to let the whole board know, I certainly notified A&F that we are looking at our revenues, looking at fees for both facility use fees as well as the other big one is our role model preschool, we have parking lot fees. So we're just taking a look at that given our expenses. So nothing, we're in the exploration and getting data phase at this particular point. The other one was electricity. Laura, Taylor, Randy, and Dawn have a small group, and they're working on trying to work on an electricity supplier type contract. Ours expires next year, and we're looking at different options for that. So we are, obviously everyone else is residentially is dealing with the rising cost of electricity supply, and we are too, so we're looking, at that. And I think, as Dan mentioned, at the next meeting of A&F, we're doing what's called an all-invoice review. We do that twice a year, where the A&F committee looks at every single invoice that we processed for that 2-week period. And that was it.
All right, thank you, Scott. Budget Committee, Jared.
Yes, so Ellen was there at our meeting last Tuesday where the Budget Committee moved the school budget, as the school proposed budget, as well as the GES contract to public hearing. There were many questions, as Scott said, during our last meeting in the meeting minutes. A couple more around the same types of things that I think we already presented as part of our overall PowerPoint. So good job by the administration. There were no changes that were actually asked for.
Nice.
So it was, I think, the first time that we've gone through and had no motions on changes. So
Yay.
good job to the administration on that.
Great.
Budget Committee will start looking at the town side of the house, and I know we'll talk about CRF later in this meeting today.
Right. All right. Thank you, Jared. C&E, Ginny?
Yes. We met on the 14th, and Stephen Bourget gave us a technology update for 2022. And I believe you all got his PowerPoint presentation, so you can get the nitty-gritty of the information, and I'll just give you some highlights. He went over the 2022 staffing, which I know we have added some staffing, and he really can use more staffing all the time, so we should keep that in our consideration for budget next year. There were some people that are working a little bit longer hours, comfortable, but they're very committed to what they do, so they just, that's kind of their work ethic. He went over the technology highlights and new instructional technologies, which were very interesting, and new instructional technologies and Schoology usage information presented from September 19th to October 18th. Over 70 integrated applications for the SAU 19, new employee portal for required training and professional development for staff, new employee portal for employee resources, new employee portal for integrating into Kaltura for video trainings, 2022 network security improvements, ongoing projects, planned future projects and upcoming projects. And just if you go through this and read the whole thing, you'll be amazed at what's going on. And I know Brian also did a presentation on email to all the parents so that they can learn how to use Schoology for themselves and to introduce their kids how to use it, so they can feel comfortable using it at home too, because there's a lot of things on it that are going to be really helpful for students. So that's what we talked about.
Great, thank you. All right, and your next?
And our next
Yep, go
meeting
ahead.
will be 12/12 at 7 p.m. in the SAU.
Perfect, thank you, Ginny. P&C?
Yep, PNC, we haven't met since the last meeting, and our next meeting is on Monday, 12/5 at 6:15 p.m. I do want to just remind everybody here, as well as the public, that we have 2 awards, our annual Cornerstone and Dreamkeeper Awards, and I believe if they haven't already been posted on the website, the applications will be found there. And the Cornerstone, so the Cornerstone is essentially for outstanding achievements within the school, whether that be staff or community members working for the district. And the Dreamkeeper Award goes out into the community, so this can be extended to individuals, organizations doing work on behalf of the school. So this is a great opportunity for anybody can nominate somebody or an organization for these awards. So we encourage everyone to think about who's been doing what in the community that has really benefited the school and consider nominating them.
Awesome, thank you, Retta. Policy met last week, and later on you'll have first reads. We have another meeting on December 12th at 5:30 at the SAU. And then we go to Technology Committee. Dan, that's you.
Well, actually, if you look at what was provided through the C&E. That's pretty much what
that
Mr.
what you
Borjak
did?
and I went through.
Okay.
That and a few other things, talking about the wiring that we're going to be doing or trying to do, increase the bandwidth, the technology that we need to replace, the multiple tens of thousands of dollars. If you remember the IBM acceptance of services that we did, they're continuing to move forward with that, and that's going pretty well, and that is going to tighten down our security and our Wi-Fi and just about everything else, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Dan. All right, SAU policy is meeting next Wednesday, November 30th at 6 PM at the SAU. If you haven't let Denise know, for those policy committee members, if you've been there, if you can be there, please do. And then on December 14th, the SAU full board is having a meeting with the budget hearing at 6 o'clock at the SAU. So a couple meetings coming up. So superintendent's report.
Thank you. Just a few quick things this evening. Mr. Gross and I are just at the beginning stages of taking a look at a new grant program that's going to be available. There are $500 million. That's a pretty big number. 500 million that have been authorized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The first group of that is 80 million that's being used for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and alternative fuel infrastructure vehicles. So specifically in the state of New Hampshire, I think there were 2 school districts that were awarded electric school buses. So unfortunately, we're not going to be eligible for that, but there is a chunk of money that we are interested in pursuing for some of the controls that we've been looking at Bartlett and at Maple, right, Mr. Gross?
Yep.
So we're at the beginning of that, but we wanted to let you know that there is yet another grant that we're going to take a look at. This one is a little bit of a bittersweet one for me. The board may be aware that we have 2 great student resource officers from the Goffstown Police Department, and one of our officers is moving on to a new position. So we're sad to see Emily Crosby leave us. Emily has been at Mountain View as our SRO for a long time. I think she's been with the force about 12 years, and she's going to be taking a job through the state. So I'm really happy for her, but she's been a great addition to our schools, and we'll be very sad to lose her. So congratulations and best wishes to Emily Crosby. Retta mentioned the Cornerstone and Dreamkeeper Award. That information is on the website already. So anyone who is interested is able to submit an application, and we'll look forward to that. We have updated, and more specifically, when I say we, I mean Dr. Chisholm. So Athena has done a little bit of a research project for us looking at the benefits of full-day kindergarten. So the board may recall, we have looked at the research, but it's been a few years. So it's been about 10 years since we've really had any kind of a comprehensive review of the research. And so I asked Athena if she would be able to take a look at the research and tell us, what does the literature tell us about full-day kindergarten? And probably not surprising to any board members, you've seen Athena's work. It was spectacular. I shared it with Mrs. Kohler. She did an incredible job, and I think it will be something that we might want to talk about in more depth and more detail, but I wanted you to know that I have received that review of the literature from Dr. Chisholm, and it's really helpful. And my last piece is we created a new confidential reporting system if anyone has any tips for school safety, and that has been put up on the website. We did get a little bit of feedback. We had a few parents that we reached out to and asked them to give us some feedback on the process. They actually were a part of the group that Shane mentioned that he had met with, and so they had some good input for us. We actually changed the process a little bit based on their feedback, and that is up and running.
Awesome. And
So,
that's it?
That's it.
Wow, I'm short. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Jerry.
As part of the grant process, I know that the Budget Committee continues to bring up heat pumps for at least Glen Lake. Is there an opportunity with these new grants that we might be able to look for something like that?
Good question. I did not hear anything about that. We were focused kind of exclusively on the control end of things, but if equipment or new, more energy efficient options exist, that's, I think, maybe a good thing for us to take a look at.
Yeah, the guidance that they're giving us is anything that can save energy is is considered, and then depending upon, the nature of, the source itself.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, with electrical prices being the way they are and being able to have heat pumps, that should be able to
Yeah.
reduce electrical charges that we would need, so it sounds like
Potentially,
it's.
could be a reduction in BTU consumption, so
Exactly.
we could take a look at that. I think at this point, it's probably early for us to have a lot of information. I was on a call with the Department of Ed today, and they just kind of presented this for the first time to us.
Yeah.
So I think we'll kind of tread carefully. Sort of along that same lines, though, Jared, is in addition to that concept of kind of the heat pumps, are these VRF systems, which is like a large-scale commercial version, and we put a couple of those into New Boston. So I wonder if that kind of technology would also potentially be eligible. So we'll take a look.
I just want to also give the board a little bit of perspective on like our likelihood. So it's $80 million across the entire United States in this grant. This is not just New Hampshire. So recognize.
Usually if you're the first in, you usually
Yeah.
get the money, so.
Right.
So just
Awesome.
for perspective.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Ren.
Actually, I think we may have talked about this before. Is solar an option at the schools? I'm just thinking of all the flat roofs.
So
Is that something?
we have talked about solar in the past. We've kind of looked at this a couple of different ways. More specifically, the kinds of solar projects that we've been asked to consider have typically involved a long-term commitment to buy power from a particular vendor, including a duration of about 20 years, which is a really long time to lock into a contract like that. Our position has been, if you own your own array, then there certainly can be savings for you, particularly in New Hampshire with net metering. But if you're leasing the array and as part of it, you're guaranteed that you're buying power at a fixed amount from one vendor for a long time, that's not something we've been interested in doing. But certainly, we will continue to take a look at that. I didn't hear anything specifically about this grant with respect to solar, Scott. I don't know if you've heard anything.
Yeah, I mean, solar is one of the components. So,
Okay.
yeah, yes, it's something that you can consider.
And I recall there was some reason, but that was several
Yeah,
years ago.
and in terms of thinking about, some of our roofs, we had a request in New Boston a few years ago to look at putting a solar array on the roof. At that time, the roof was not in great condition, so that you also have to factor in all of these flat roofs are not like your traditional asphalt shingle type roofs. These are all rubber membrane. There's a different level of roofing that's involved. So, but I think we need to continue to look at solar. And certainly, I know a conversation that Mr. Gross and I have had is not too far to my left, we have 110 acres of land, and a lot of it is open. So there's another option when you think about the plausibility of looking at a solar array, that could potentially be another area that we could explore further.
And-
You had another one,
Yeah,
right?
just
Go ahead.
very quickly. We had the principal and vice principal come a couple meetings ago about changing the lunch to single lunch. Have we gotten any feedback on that?
Well, so we haven't gotten a lot of feedback. Unfortunately, I will tell you that the high school very desperately wanted to do a survey and to ask for opinions from all of our students. We did not do that. I think the board is aware that we're not allowed to do any non-academic surveys of any kind anymore. That's a new state law. So unfortunately, that included asking kids if you liked one lunch or two. We would have to have parental permission to do that, which seems kind of crazy for high school kids. But we actually did a little surprise visit to the high school. We picked a day that I specifically knew that Mr. McBride would not be here. And a team of us descended upon the school. That's true. He'll tell you that. And so I think it was Mr. Loring, myself, Mrs. Kohler, Mrs. Tabor, Mr. Gross. Who else was a part of that, Wendy? I think that was the group.
That's it.
So a fair number of us came over and spent the entire duration of the lunch period. We walked around, we were inside, we were outside, we were by the cafeteria, we walked the hallways, we looked at classrooms, and then we got together and debriefed with the high school administration and some of the staff that supervised lunches, and we gave them about a page and a half of our impressions, our thoughts, and I would say overall, I think the students were very well behaved. I think it was a good experience, and we did give quite a bit of feedback in terms of kind of some of the details of some of the duties that we saw in terms of teacher duties. So we've given that feedback, and we have not followed up more on that. But so far, things are going well. Mr. McBride has not discussed that he's kind of having an issue with the one lunch and wants to go back. So I think at this point, he's likely to want to continue that. But I think we still need to continue to talk to Mrs. Bizzarro. We need to make sure that our lunches are going smoothly, that we have enough staff. But yeah, I would say overall, still going well.
Maybe we can have an update at the next meeting or next
Yeah.
couple meetings, just to see where they
Yeah,
stand.
and in fact, I might want the high school to come and provide that update themselves.
Right, because didn't Frank say it was going to be for a week?
We did longer. I think it was.
Because it's still going on now,
It's
right?
still going on. So we had committed to a week, and if it didn't go well, we would switch back. So I
Okay.
think he's intent on continuing that, but we can certainly circle back
Yeah.
to that with the board.
That'd be great. Thanks, Rita. Go ahead, Ginny.
Did the students feel like they had easy access to lunches?
Mr. Gross, you talked to a lot of kids about that. Do you want to chime in on kind of your, so Mr. Gross conducted a very non-scientific survey, getting.
You can't survey, you know.
You can't survey, but you can
Can't
ask
survey.
kids a
Kid
question.
question, yeah.
And so we said, so did you like
It's
one
not
lunch, or,
compiling.
did you like it this way, or did you like it the way before? So Scott, you want to talk a little bit about kind of your
Yeah,
impressions?
so I think, again, unscientific, probably spoke to 30, 40 kids. I'd say easily 70% or maybe a little more liked it. The one, of the, say, the 25, 30% that didn't like it, they felt that it was too rushed. And the other thing is that it depending upon what you're serving that particular day. So if you're serving pizza, more kids want pizza. So you could have lines that might be, say, 12 to 15 minutes to get through the line. On a day that is not a non-pizza day, 10 to 12. Because the day that I was there, I did try to time, it was a non-pizza day, and it took, on average, about 10 minutes for someone to go through the line. And the checkout piece, Megan has added an additional checkout person. So that it's just getting the food itself. But the checkout is going extremely well. And also Megan is working on a kiosk in the theater area where hot food would be served as well, to try to distance out, rather than having almost everybody on that end of the building. There would be more here. But again, I think some of the good benefits of it are that kids who might want to see their friends, who might have a different lunch period and want to talk, well, now you can do that. So I think, as I said, I think we gave a lot of good feedback to the administration to consider, and it's in their court in terms of fixing some of those things.
Wendy, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the students that I spoke to liked the fact that there was a kiosk down near the theater, especially those students that weren't getting hot lunch, that wanted to kind of do that grab and go cold or a la carte items. A couple of the students I spoke to said they would love to see another one of those kiosks. And again, I think that's a conversation we would need to have with Megan Bizzarro to see if she would have the ability to staff that. I agree with Scott that the students think that the line is doable in the hot lunch line, except for pizza day. So I guess it's a prop to, Mrs. Bizzarro's staff for making incredible pizza, because that day tends to be a little bit more busy. But the students are very respectful in line. It's well supervised in the cafeteria, especially when there are that many students in line. I was impressed with the amount of visibility of staff, so I thought it went very well for the day that we kind of did our surprise visit.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions for Brian? I have a quick question.
Please.
Since Officer Emily is leaving, are they replacing her with another?
Well, we
Police
don't,
officer?
I don't know that that's going to be the case.
Oh,
In the
So-
short term.
Yeah,
Short term.
in the short term, I think they're short-staffed,
Yeah.
so I think that they've had a lot of difficulty hiring, so I
Okay.
don't know.
is she gone now?
No.
She's not, I think she's got another week.
Another week.
December 2nd, I believe.
Yeah, so not a lot of time, though.
Okay, so we're
I spoke to the
figuring
chief
something
last
out.
week. The chief understands that this is important to us, but he certainly has staffing challenges, hiring challenges.
Brian, if I may also add, in the past, and what I can speak from when I was at Mountain View, if Officer Cosby wasn't in the building, Officer Pelletier was a phone call away. We could also call dispatch if we needed an officer to come.
So you have a backup plan?
There's absolutely
to
backups
cover
in place.
until we get someone.
Absolutely.
So we hope to have someone when police can.
When the police is
Okay.
able to do that, we hope so.
Okay, awesome. All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you, Brian. All right, moving on, old business, review of proposed draft 2023 warrant. So that's in our packet. Scott, you want to talk on that?
Yeah, so,
or-
I mean, we spoke about this at the A&F committee meeting, and first off, I want to thank Jared. Ellen's not here, but Jared, working with the budget committee, that was obviously, it's a long process. Want to thank you for all your help in that. The warrant articles, we have our budget as, it's the election of officers is warrant article number 1. Warrant article 2 is your operating budget. And as Mr. Talbot stated, that's going to go to public hearing in January. The next warrant article is Article 3, which is your collective bargaining agreement with your support staff. That too is going forward to the public hearing. The next warrant article has to do with your deposit into the capital reserve fund. And I had mentioned to you at a prior meeting that I felt that $200,000 is just insufficient with the needs that we have, and that probably $300,000 to $400,000 is more appropriate. I spoke with the superintendent about this about a week or so ago, and my assessment is that with a support staff contract on the ballot, to go to that lower number, go to $300,000. As you can see, when we review CIP and just some of the things that have come up that I've mentioned before, where, you know, we have to replace a boiler at Glen Lake that we didn't budget for, or, you know, the fire panel, which, you know, we have to replace. We do need some funds there. And then the other thing too is that at a bare minimum, you know, we have to factor in that this field that we're going to install next year, it's going to need to be replaced. That replacement cost in today's dollars is around $550,000 for the turf. So you have to build in, you know, a 10 to 12 year lifespan. You have to replace that carpet out there. So, you know, this, when we go forward, we have to factor that in as well if we're going to be smart about, you know, our future planning. So I think 300,000 is a prudent number, you know, at this point. We know we have to revisit CIP. My last review of it, I think if you take out an elementary school, kindergarten, any type of those expansions, it's still $5 to $6 million that you have, whether it be pavement replacements, boiler replacements, roof replacements. So I don't want to scare anybody with the word bond, but I think that's inevitable with what we can see on that 6-year time horizon. So, yeah, my recommendation would be 300,000 for this year, coming again from whatever the unassigned fund balance will be on June 30th of this year.
And then the fifth article?
Then the last article is going to be the closing of the Bartlett Capital Reserve Fund. So you'll recall the board voted to pretty much liquidate that fund. We're going to wait until the last possible second to request that from the trustees. So more often than not, we'll be looking at like probably under $20 in that account when it does get liquidated. That language that you see there has not been reviewed by school districts, legal counsel, nor the Department of Revenue Administration. That is the DRA language, but I do want our attorney, Gordon Graham, to take a look at all of the language there. And then the DRA always does a review of our language, but we wait until we know what the board wants to do, and then it's called a pre-review, and that's what DRA does, and then we give it to, once you kind of finalize what the intent of what you want on this warrant, then legal counsel will then make sure that it's proper and legal.
Anybody have any questions or comments? All right, so the next step is to send it to the,
The next step would be, Jared wasn't at last meeting, but that'll be if the board needs to adopt a number to insert for the capital reserve fund, and so there would be a motion needed, if that's what you want to place on the warrant, then Jared can communicate that, and then through me, we'll let them know. They would also move that to a public hearing. They would hear our rationale for that, and they would, again, move that to a public hearing. That's the last piece for the budget.
so do you want to
committee.
do that tonight?
I think it would be helpful unless there's
Okay.
any, if there's any concern,
All
but there aren't, the budget committee is going to be meeting to discuss the town's budget and warrant articles over the next probably 3 to 4 weeks. So they said they would squeeze that in.
All right, so is everybody comfortable with 300,000 this year? Or not comfortable? So you're looking for a motion to approve the 300,000
Yeah.
so that Jared can bring it to the
Exactly.
budget. So does anybody want to make that motion? Is anybody uncomfortable with the 300,000?
How much is the Glen Lake boiler replacement
35 to 40,000,
and the fire panel?
45 to 50,000.
So there's a good example of $100,000 of expenses that we did not know about or plan on. So unfortunately, we're using this fund for two purposes. It's for sort of the emergency fixes, such as these two projects, but it's also the more proactive, preventative, looking at our CIP needs.
And I can give you another one. So we applied for what's called a SAFE grant through the state for access controls here at Goffstown High School. That project is about $170,000. The project cap is $100,000. So in my opinion, since we already have some form of door locking mechanisms, this could be a CRF type project, but you would then need it to finish it. Or if there was a match on any type of grant, we use CRF monies to match. So I think, like I said, a lot of times we use it proactively because we're planning on something like the theater or stairs, et cetera. We're seeing this year where it was reactive, meaning that boiler and the fire panel piece. So it goes both ways, but it's very wise to have this type of money in a fund that you can draw upon when you have these situations.
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Scott, I know that you probably may know it from the top of your memory, but if we looked at $300,000, what would that money be used for? What would be targeted in that fiscal year to be used for CRF funds? Or are we looking to potentially, only use some of it and the rest would be carrying over to future years where we have those big expenses?
Like right off the top of my head, we know we've got about $150,000 of unallocated funds in our CRF. So of that, almost $100,000, if we use the CRF for the fire panel and the boiler, let's just say that gets us close to about 100, that leaves us with 50. If we embark upon doing this access controls and potentially some door replacements, boom, you would have used $300,000 just in that alone. I'm not saying that's where we would go, but I just wanted to kind of give you proper perspective. So the access control piece is something around $170,000. The doors that go along with it, easily another $150 in terms of exterior type doors here. So that's just one little piece. We have talked about, we have some roof slopes. When I say a slope, not the entire roof, at different schools that need work. I have to go back to my CIP, but there's $6 million in CIP. There's never going to be a shortage of, whether you wanted to replace a bathroom or redo a bathroom. That alone is like $100,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ginny.
Scott, you say that you're recommending 300,000, But listening to your discussion, it sounds like you really think it needs to be more.
Yeah, I do.
So
But it's not-
where do we stand with that?
I think that we need time, probably towards the end of the school year, when we talk about our retreat, in terms of what we're going to use our capital reserve fund for, and what realistically we may need to bond. So, when we did an analysis, if you've been to Mountain View Middle School, is a great example, the pavement there is probably the worst pavement that we have in the district. And although Randy is working on getting quotes from Continental Paving, et cetera, but it could be like $500,000 to like replace the road and all the paving around Mountain View Middle School. It would take us forever to try, and then when we talk about the high school, we have to do the same thing at Maple Avenue. We could have well over $1 million in just pavement replacement. That would take us, under our current course, 5 years to save up for. That doesn't talk about boilers that we have, or we have air handlers, air conditioning units, you name it, flooring. So with what we have, we probably have enough projects to bond something, potentially. Do it all as like one big district-wide improvement bond. But I'm not prepared yet to talk about what that looks like, what those rates are, because bond rates have gone up. But I think we've got far too much that we have to do over the next, say, 6 years, where I don't think we're going to be able to chip away at it at $200,000 or $300,000. We would probably have to minimum fund this thing at $500,000 if we wanted to chip away at things, $500,000 to $600,000 to stay ahead. And I just don't know if we can do that. Certainly going, Ginny, from $200,000 to $600,000 deposit is not
We
one.
thought
It's a
that was
big
too
jump.
big
It's
of
not
a
gonna
jump.
fly.
Yeah,
No.
we thought it was too big of a
Yeah.
jump.
Especially with the contract.
And that's just it, Heather.
With the
We-
contract,
we-
okay.
The conversation that we had was too big of a jump, and we have the GESS contract, that's got to be our priority this year, so we thought 300 was kind of a good compromise.
Okay, I was just kind of confused as to the discussion. and
Yeah,
what
Yeah.
the
I think
recommended
Scott had
number
kind of
was.
maybe a larger number
Yeah.
that we kind of were discussing, but we thought that it might be too big of a jump, too
Makes
fast.
sense, makes sense, yeah.
Go ahead, Rita.
I really like the idea. I think we did kind of touch base on this at our last retreat, but it seems like having that kind of strategic plan about what we're going to need in the long run, even with the field, we know what that's going to be, and tying it to the CIP, because I think that's where the public may have questions, is like, well, are you just inventing things as you go? And it's like, no, we know these things are coming down the road, and this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how much we should have in the reserve fund. I mean, we understand savings accounts and, why you do that, and I think just having it as a holistic picture would be good, and maybe that would.
I always keep the CIP here with me, but there's a lot
Right.
that is in here, and, it's something that I think is a good board retreat, and coming up with, kind of how we're gonna, do that. We're lucky, though, like, our window replacement project, that took $1 million off of our CIP, just using ESSER funds, so, but there's, just a
And
whole
we haven't
host of
talked about
things.
technology, but certainly
That's another biggie.
you've heard us mention that there are issues with our Wi-Fi portals. Every single one of those units is about $1,500, and we have hundreds of them. So just doing that replacement is going to be a pile of money.
Okay, so where does the board want to stand on this? 'Cause it
I'm
sounds-
comfortable with the 300.
Okay, so,
I'll make a motion that
Motion?
we offer to the Budget Committee our Article 4 at the $300,000 level.
all right, so I have a motion by Dan. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Caroline, sorry.
Ms.
Jenny.
Chair, just want to
Yes, go ahead.
clarify, the money's to come from where? Unreserved fund balance or raised through taxation?
Says
Unassigned.
The
fund
only thing I
balance.
don't like that I've read on all of these that come from unassigned fund balance is the sentence that says, "No amount to be raised from taxation." That is not 100% truthful statement, because it has been run by taxation in the previous time. It should probably, or could say, to be raised from additional taxation. Because the money came from taxes. Is this something that, this is not a DRA thing, is it?
I think it was just, I don't think so, Dan. I think it was just what's been on our ballots in the past.
Does anybody have any objection to that?
Better, go ahead.
In just hearing it, I'm wondering if we could say no amount to be released from new taxation, because additional.
That's the same thing.
Additional taxations makes it sound like.
Yep.
We're gonna tax, some of it's gonna get, come
Right,
from
more
taxes.
That works.
So what did you say? Say it
Just
again.
add the word, no amount to be raised from new taxation.
New taxation.
I could do that.
Is that good?
And we'll just need to review that with our attorney
Yeah.
and review it with DRA, but I think that
Jared,
should
are
be
you?
good.
So the money
Oh,
would
he's
come
thinking.
from any unassigned fund balance that would be available, should it become available.
I
Right.
think that the wording was unassigned fund balance available on June 3rd.
July
July
1st,
1st, right.
Yeah,
2023.
or June through, yeah,
That is DRA specific.
yes,
That sentence or two.
that one I remember.
Jared, I see your gears going.
Yeah, more of a comment, not necessarily a question.
Go for it.
Oh, okay. You know, I've been somewhat consistent on this, and I've talked with many different groups in Goffstown, you know, the New Hampshire Taxpayers for or Goffstown Taxpayers for Justice, and a few others. And I'm just uncomfortable articulating that we're keeping money instead of returning it to a taxpayer through either over receiving additional revenues or undercutting or under expending our budget. I really think that we should be returning that money to the taxpayers themselves, and if we're asking for money a following year, we ask for that as part of the ballot. Even with this verbiage, I think it's better, but I don't think it gets to where it's very clean from year to year. And I think we've done a great job. The Budget Committee, I think, has looked at our history and what we've spent the CRF money on. I think they're relatively comfortable. Scott did put that in the packet. It was asked about, and people had it very present. But I just always look at it, if you underspend a budget, we've used the government gun to take the money from the taxpayers, we should be giving it back to the taxpayers and asking for that money that we need the following year. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Jared. Anyone? All right, so do you want to amend your motion to include new?
Yes.
Okay. And Caroline, do you second his amendment? Okay. Is there any further discussion before I take a vote? Scott, go ahead.
I have heard Jared for the last 2 to 3 years, like, loud and clear. When we do the voter's guide, I will typically put, if you vote for this, you know, it has, like, this is the impact. So if you were to say vote no on this, you would see X go back in your taxes. So I do think that the voters and myself are given a chance. You can either vote for it or not vote for it. And in the voter's guide, I explained to them that this, in the past, this $200,000 is 11 cents in the tax rate. Or in this case, it'll be like 18 or 19 cents in the tax rate, however you vote. So in my mind, I feel as if I'm trying to thread that needle between what you have expressed and maybe a few others that you've spoken to, as well as the board's actions. So I just want to be clear that it does have a tax consequence, and I put that in the voter guide. So that was all I wanted to say.
Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with what you're doing, Scott. I think we're doing everything we can to educate and to communicate to our community. There are some that they just always say, oh, I didn't understand it, because they don't go through the tax guide. They're not engaged with the community, and they're showing up to vote, and they're looking at the verbiage that's there, and they're interpreting a certain way. And I want to try to be as clear as we can on the words that we have within the actual measures
Cool.
themselves.
Yeah, I get it.
So I think that you've done a great job, the administration's done a great job. We, as individuals, communicate with our constituents as much as we can. But there are, we only have, what, 3,000 people showing up to vote? Out of-
Not
out of
even.
How many?
2,000.
Yeah, so it's just, we have to try to educate as best we can, and sometimes it's only on the ballot itself that we have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Jared. So we've had a lot of discussion. I have a motion, I have a second. If there's no further discussion, I'm going to take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstention? All right, so we have one no, Denise, and the rest yes, so motion passed. So Scott, Article 5 you want our attorney to look at, correct?
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to have the attorney now look at the entire warrant.
so do you, but we
You need to take a motion to put that on the warrant.
Yes, for 2 and 3, so do you want us to do that tonight?
Yeah,
That the
this-
school board recommends?
I need you to vote to put the CRF, closing the CRF.
Okay,
on
first.
the warrant.
Yep,
And then upon you doing that, now I have kind of locked in the warrant articles, and then I can give it to our attorney and the DRA to make sure that
okay,
the
before
language-
we do, the school board recommends.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now we need a motion to put Article 4 on the warrant.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, by Dan. Do I have a second? By Ginny. Sorry, Caroline, I saw her hand go up. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions. All right, we have one opposed, rest yes. Motion passed. All right, so you'll get back to us the next couple of board meetings?
We have one more.
We have one more, Article 5,
on the
which is
warrant.
discontinue the Bartlett CRF.
Right, but I thought you wanted the lawyer to, oh.
No, we're gonna put it on the
move
warrant.
forward.
We're gonna
Okay.
put it on
We'll,
Right.
And then you'll do the wording. Okay, so
Yeah.
Article 5 to go on the
I'll
warrant.
make a motion, we put Article 5, discontinuance of the Bartlett CRF on the warrant, pending actual verbiage approved by the district attorney.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second? By Shane. Any further discussion?
I know the question came up, Ms. Chair. Scott, for the liquidation of this fund, any monies that are still within this fund would go where?
To the general fund.
So Fund 10?
You all set?
Yeah.
Which would be then, without an appropriation, sent back to the
Back to
taxpayers.
taxation, yeah. All right, any further discussion on Article 5?
Well, just for
Yeah, go
giggles,
ahead.
we've done this before, there's what, a few thousand left?
There was $77 to $7,800 that was
Yeah.
in there, but we're using.
We used
you
some of
vote-
it.
You voted to pretty much liquidate it.
Almost
to go
liquidated
towards
everything,
the
so
wi- Right, almost go to everything, going
it's gotta
towards
be
that Windows.
pennies left in it now, if not dollars.
I don't think we have actually liquidated it, because I didn't sign, I haven't given it to the trustees yet, so.
Okay,
I'm
but
going
after
to
we
do
give it to
that.
the trustees, by the time it
Yep.
hits it, there really won't be anything.
It should be under $20,
Yeah.
if any, if that.
Okay.
It's gonna be pennies.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know if we have to have within the motion what happens with that money. I'm not sure. That's what I think the lawyer's going to look at as well.
Yeah, I think you will see that, to any remaining funds to go back, I think that'll probably be part of his
Be
review.
in the
I
article.
took this off of the DRA template to close a capital reserve fund, so I used their language, but more than likely, the attorney will probably insert some more wording in there.
All right, so I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Thank you. All right, so you'll get back to us on that. All right, so the next is FY23 warrant capital reserve fund deposit.
It's use of the capital reserve fund. Oh, I'm sorry, that one you already took care of.
Oh, we
So
did? Okay.
You did that already.
All right, so then the number C, use of capital reserve fund, we talked about that.
Right, so we've got 2 unbudgeted items that Randy has made us aware of. The Glen Lake boiler needs to be replaced. Randy has a quote, it was in the neighborhood of $35,000 to $40,000. And as well as to replace the fire panel here at the high school and that is that $45,000 to $50,000 range. I don't know the exact amounts. Again, prices do fluctuate, but I think we should be in a position so that we can order with the supply chain issues the way that they are. We know that if something bad were to happen to one of the two boilers at Glen Lake, we can get by, but I think it makes more sense to actually make some decisions on these things, order them, and get them in the queue for installation versus, punting, waiting till the spring and seeing what potentially our budget looks like. I think these things are too important, and I'm usually the other way around on this. I'm like, oh, let's wait, but I think on these, we want to, get these things ordered, because it might take until the spring to do that. If you want me to, I can look at our budget and see what I think that what we're projected at, and you can make a decision at your next meeting. If you want to save funds in your capital reserve fund for other things, I can certainly go through our budget and look at our projections and do that as well. So I'll go either way. But I just want you to know, we got two of these projects, two things that have to get done. We didn't budget for them. So whether I do budget transfers or whether we use capital reserve fund, I think we got to start thinking about moving these things ahead over the next, say, 30 days. I don't need a decision tonight.
Well, Jared had his hand up. Go ahead, Jared.
Does this cost, we've followed policy, so we've gone out with RFPs to get quotes, or?
You don't need to go for an RFP if it's under 50,000. And in some cases, with a fire panel, it's more than likely.
Single source?
Yeah.
Okay. And would these costs also include the installation, or this is just the purchase?
No, it's everything. So again, I don't need action this evening. I just want to put this in your head. So I'll we can put on the next agenda or the one after that. But whether we use capital reserve fund or whether we do budget transfers within the current budget, I think it's important for us to start to order. Let's sign these contracts with these vendors and let's get these things ordered. I mean, Randy has shared with us that we were going to try to do some replacement sections of this boiler, but it was like 35 weeks out to get the sections. So the boiler itself, Brian, I think he said 12 weeks, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So ordinarily, you just buy something, you can wait, but now with, I'm nervous that if we wait until May, when we typically look at where our budget is that, and if we have another, let's say we have 4 months of a wait time, it's like, is that good? Or 5 months? So I think these are things we have to kind of jump on.
How much money do we have in our CRF that's currently unallocated?
150,000-ish, right around there.
So that would basically cover
I mean, these are,
important.
to take a term from our superintendent, mission-critical items to
Yes,
keep a building up and running.
absolutely.
So I don't see the point in waiting if we know what they're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Does
And
everyone else agree?
I also will say that I think it demonstrates that we use this capital reserve fund for proactive planning and for reactive planning. And to me, that's important. Yeah. Do I think it's great to save money and then use this money for capital reserve fund for something else and perhaps do a budget transfer? Maybe. But, and if that's what you want me to do, I will come back to you next meeting and say, as of this point, here's what we're projecting for end of year fund balance. But it's tricky in December to project out what you're going to be doing in May. I mean, it's hard, you can have special ed placements and all these other things. So to me, this is what a capital reserve fund is for.
So does everybody feel now would be the time for Scott to go ahead and order the boiler and the panel?
Yep.
So what kind of motion do you need? Because you don't have exact, you just,
Well,
consensus?
You can wait till the next meeting. I'll give you exact motions and give you more exact prices,
Okay.
with Randy and Dawn.
Okay, does that work for everyone? Is that too late? Because that's
No, I
another
think
2
that's
weeks.
fine. I did this intentionally because I wanted the board to make some decisions on this by the end of the year,
Okay.
because knowing that if we do have a 3-month lead time, or that it's not.
So more information for December 5th with,
Yeah.
with everybody ready to make a motion and
And
vote?
I'll have more precise,
Okay.
numbers. When I say more precise, it's, with contingency, you all know how that goes.
Yeah.
So it's,
All right, so you'll have that December 5th?
right,
Okay. So you're all set then?
yeah.
All right, so new business, the high school field renovation project approval. This is going back to our public hearing. And Scott has typed up some motions in our packets. So if somebody wants to read number 1, the dark black.
I will move to accept and expend as unanticipated revenue under the provisions of RSA 198:20B, an anonymous gift in the amount of $250,000 for the Goffstown High School field renovation project.
All right, thank you, Shane. Do I have a second? By Ginny. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Okay, we're unanimous. And then, well, Scott, you had,
Yeah, I separated it out.
you had separate, so you want the second motion also to
Yeah,
go with
it's-
that donation?
Yeah, it just
Okay.
authorizes me to acknowledge.
Acknowledge the donation? Okay, so who would like to read number 2?
I move to direct the administration to formally communicate the school board's gratitude to the donor on behalf of the Goffstown School District, recognizing that this generous gift will allow the district to improve the high school athletic field that will benefit the students of the district for years to come.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second? By Ginny? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? All right, we're unanimous. So then the next one is to execute the contracts regarding the field renovation, which is number 3.
And I just wanted to explain this. I explained it
Yeah,
to A&F, but
go
I
ahead.
didn't to the full board, is that I have been working with our school district's legal counsel on the contract. Legal counsel made many, many corrections and changes to the contract, and I shared those with A&F. I heard back from the Field Turf, the company that we're working with, that they have pretty much agreed to the vast majority of them. They're waiting to hear feedback from their civil engineer on a couple of things, but I wanted the board to know that we did our due diligence in terms of, I would say, there were, Heather would say about a quarter, if not more, of this was redlined, and so there was a lot of work that the attorney put forward that protects our interests. And then the other piece of it is I was able to work with the town of Goffstown. They are going to be the independent third party that is reviewing the work, the oversight piece of this project. Because we're using what's called a design-build firm, we have to have an outside entity who's coming in to making sure that the work is being done per the plans. As an example, there are 4 or 5 layers of subbase. Each has different thicknesses. You have to make sure that the stone is washed stone, et cetera. The town of Goffstown, the DPW director, Adam Jacobs, and Scott Ozano, who is also the town engineer, they have agreed to go and come here periodically, every week if necessary, or sooner, to make sure that the work that's being done is per those specifications, and then they're going to bill us their time. So at a fraction of the cost that if I had a civil engineer or another firm do it. So I'm super grateful for them, and I'm going to execute probably a 1-page agreement with the town of Goffstown DPW that just acknowledges what the rate is and that we're going to reimburse them for their time.
All right.
So those are the 2 things that I will be signing. Secondly, I wanted, as you'll see as part of that motion, and I think Dan is going to read the next one because we did tweak it a little bit, but because we have multiple funding sources, and again, I'm just going to reiterate them, is that 1.1 is federal funds, 350,000 is from impact fees, and $500,000 is a private donation. Until I have all of the monies from the private donation, I can't sign and contractually obligate the district until all money is potentially either in our hands or we know, like through this, we have approvals through the state for those federal grants. So I'm not worried about that. But I can't sign a contract for monies that we just don't have. So what we're going to be doing is our contract is going to be structured that it's going to have options, or what some of you have been termed change orders. So as the money comes into our bank account, I can execute on those change orders in a way that should make us all feel comfortable. So I can't obligate you guys for monies that we don't have. So that's why that motion is written kind of the way that it is. That is reviewed by our legal counsel, and we will execute contract terms once money and funds are available.
Okay, thank you, Scott. All right, go ahead, Dan.
I'll make a motion that we authorize the business administrator to execute the contracts and agreements related to the Goffstown High School field renovation project based on the following conditions. 1, school district council review and approval. 2, the approved Goffstown High School field renovation project funding sources that are available at the time of signing.
Perfect, thank you, Dan. Do I have a second? By Shane. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, we're unanimous. So the last one is on the public hearing of the lead grant, so we need a motion, which is number 4, to approve that. Somebody want to read that?
I move to accept and expand as unanticipated revenue under the provisions of RSA 198:20B, the anticipated proceeds from the lead remediation grant for New Hampshire schools from the New Hampshire Education Department. Said grant amount will be in excess of $5,000.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Do I have a second? By Retta? I saw your hand. All right, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? We're unanimous. All right, so I think we're good on all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So the next is a high school field trip permission,
So
which
this-
we have in our papers.
Yeah, so a summary of this is that high school world history teachers here are looking to take students to the Songus Industrial History Center in Lowell. This is in Lowell, Massachusetts, and students will participate in what's called the Bale to Bolt program, which explores how economic structures, social structures, and human environment interactions during the Industrial Revolution change and impact society. So you've got a little bit of a summary of this. We're looking to do this on probably 3 or 4 different dates in December to accommodate about 60 students per session. So this normally wouldn't be something that would come to you, but it is an out-of-state field trip.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion? Go ahead, Ginny.
I make a motion to approve the GHS field trip to the Songus Industrial History Center in Lowell, Mass.
Thank you, Ginny. Do I have a second? Go ahead, Shane. All right, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? We're unanimous. Have a great time.
Thank you.
All right, so the next is, there's only a couple of first reads. So if you have any questions, we'll go through them at the next meeting, but we try to clean up some stuff and
Would it be worthy of pointing out what we did to JFAB?
sure, we can do that. So JFAB, which is admission of non-resident students, this was supposed to come back for a second read, and, but we wanted to tweak it a little bit. So you can see that we have the first sentence, and then we have 1 and 2, and we highlighted that the senior status is at the end of a school year. And then we have the paragraph that talks about tuition with non-resident students, and then 1 and 2 as to what qualifies that. So we just tried to make it a little cleaner and easier for people to understand. So if you guys have any questions on any of that, we can take them. If you have any now or at the next meeting, we'll come back with questions. All right, so moving on to staffing.
So thank you. So we have a couple of notifications. So we have a track change. Congratulations to Jen Boschman here at the high school, moving from Masters to Masters 15. We will send her a congratulations. And for your approval, we have 2 nominations, one for Jillian Godbit and Brannigan Bernstein. So this would be for one elementary one-year position, and the other would be for a 50% moving to full-time Title I teacher at Mountain View.
Okay, anybody have any questions? All right, so I'll need a motion to approve the teacher nominations.
I'll make a motion to approve the teacher nominations as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second? By Ginny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, we're unanimous. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. Next, we have co-curricular and athletic nominations. You can see there's a big, long list here. I won't read this. I will highlight that out of this list of 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 25 people, there's only one new coach that's on that, which is pretty remarkable. And the coach is somebody who has worked with us in the past. So welcome back to Jerry Haynes. And
I was going to say, he's not new.
No, he's been around a long time, knows a
Yeah.
lot about basketball. So we're glad to welcome him back.
Nice. All right, so, and any questions on any of these? All right, so I need a motion to accept the co-curricular sport nominations.
Make a motion to accept the co-curricular sport nominations as presented.
Thank you, Caroline. Do I have a second?
A second.
By Shane. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, we're unanimous.
And the last piece with respect to staffing, and I apologize,
That's
Heather, that
fine.
I took your sheet.
No worries.
So we have in your packets, we have a little bit of a summary. We currently have 2 retired Goffstown teachers who are working as substitute teachers for us. So they've done short-term stints as well as long-term stints. We only have 2. And we would like to recommend to the board that we increase the long-term rate of pay to a master's step 9 on the pay grid for retired teachers. So this basically would just give a small increase to our retired teachers if they are still working as long-term subs. We are fortunate, as I said, we have 2 current people who are doing this, and they are wonderful teachers. I'm so glad that they're still with us, and I don't know if this will incentivize any more to sign on, but that's kind of what we would hope for. And really, if I can get a retired, a very experienced teacher, they are turnkey. So they come into a long-term sub kind of arrangement, and you're talking about somebody who has a pretty extensive bag of tricks. So we think that that's a really good thing. And if you look at the bottom, what Mrs. McGrath has kind of organized here is she did what the actual costs would have been if we would have increased the rates. And as you can see, it's about $2,000 a year is the extent of what we think the exposure would be. So we would recommend, we think this is a good thing, we think it's good for kids. Anytime we can get highly qualified, experienced teachers in front of our students, that's a great thing.
Anybody have any? Go ahead, Rhea.
I agree. I think it's great, especially when you're not anticipating these openings. One thing to just keep in mind, I think sometimes when you have a long-term sub, they become full-time teachers down the road. It's a great way to get people in, but kind of just keep that in mind too if there's openings for
Sure.
that as well. But I agree.
Unfortunately, for a retired teacher to come back into the workforce, they have to give up their retirement,
Right.
and they couldn't. So we wouldn't be incentivizing them to come back to work full-time. In fact, as a long-term sub, they have to be careful just how long-term it is.
Yeah, they do.
Because once you get to a certain level, you lose your retirement. And that wouldn't be profitable for them.
Yeah, and so Mrs. McGrath works really closely with the teachers, so we know the rules, we know how many hours they're allowed to work.
Right.
And again, I don't know if this will incentivize anyone, but right now, we've got 2 great retired teachers. I'd love to have 3, I'd love to have 5, I'd love to have 15. But I'll be happy to keep the 2 that we have.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on this? so we'll need a motion.
I can make a specific motion if you'd like.
Absolutely, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we increase the retiree long-term substitute rate equal to a master's Step 9 of the GEA pay grid for those retirees from Goffstown who have worked for at least 15 years in the Goffstown School District and who have retired from teaching from the Goffstown School District. It's very myopic and specific.
Yes, thank you, Dan, appreciate
That's
that.
myopic and specific, wasn't part of it.
Do I have a
It's kinda like
second?
what they said. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Shane. All right, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's it for staffing, correct?
That's it for staffing.
All right, other business that may legally come before the meeting, because we do have non-public. All right, seeing none,
And we'll go under C and only C,
we're not doing A?
not doing A.
Okay, all right, so I'll need a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A32C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the public body itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. This exemption shall extend to any application for assistance or tax abatement or waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant.
So moved.
By Shane, do I have a second? By Ginny, sorry, I saw her hand. All right, I have to do roll call. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Caroline? Did you say yes? Yeah. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. Shane?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. We are in non-public, so we'll go to the conference room. Thank you, everyone.